So what we're going to go over first is how to customize your notes. And so all of that is going to primarily be done in the patient notes section of the customization under customization. And you can see we've also split up into sections for your initial notes and your review notes. So it's really important to note that anything you put in your initial notes section will not actually impact your review console. So if you want something to be reflected in both, you're going to have to duplicate that personalization language across both. And so let's start with a couple of examples of how we change the notes. So one example is going to be changing the headings. So by default, we've got chief complaint and the SOAP note structure, which will effectively dictate the headings used throughout the note. But if you have a more nuanced structure, or you want to include or exclude a heading, quite often you might want to change some of these. And so the best language you can use to do this is start off by saying you must always use the following headings. So the key here is to use really direct but concise language and kind of referring to Lyrebird almost if it's like a person or an entity. And so we could say here's, let's say we've got chief complaint, but we want to change it to presenting problem instead of chief complaint. So we could say quotations, then we can say history of instead of history presenting complaint. And so here, this kind of technique is best if you want to redo a large amount of the headings. So you want almost entirely different structure. But let's say that you want to just change one of the headings. So
Can I just interrupt you for one moment there? Where you've got writing style dashes and then you're using the quotation marks to bracket your headings.
Yep.
Is writing style, is that the default dashes or is that something else?
So the writing style is how the notes are written. So effectively whether they have like dot points or dashes or sentence style to indent them. And I'll show you a couple of examples of that. Okay, so here we've got dashes effectively. And so that's kind of like starting every note with a dash. But what we can do is open this one here, for example, and that's got dot points. And then sentence style, we'll write it in extended sentences without a dot point or dash, and it will look more like this. And it could say like has been feeling unwell effectively.
Okay, yeah.
Awesome. So we go back here. So I'm going to show you just quickly how to add a new heading in, for example, that doesn't exist. So you could say always add a depression heading. Physical exam. And so what we're doing here is telling it like where to add this heading and what heading to add. And then the second part of this is you want to tell it what to include in this heading. So for example, what we could say is do a full stop and then say in this, under this heading, include my impression of the patient's presenting problem and include any diagnosis made effectively. And so that's what you would write here. So understanding include my impression problem as and similarly, if you want to replace a heading, you can say effectively the same thing, but you would say something like, and we'll just do it in the review notes now, you could say always replace investigations heading with imaging. And what this will do is effectively tell it, hey, you've already got this heading that is including this information, just replace the name with this other name. And then you can also edit, that becomes less relevant now because you're already defining and Lyrebird already knows what to include under this heading. But you can also similarly tell it what you want included or excluded under that heading.
So Kai, are you talking about when you're having the consult that investigations are discussed with the patient and it's going to record under, rather than writing investigations and what was discussed, it'll just say imagine or whatever.
Oh,
is that what you...
Yeah, I didn't get
imaging.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay.
Did you have any other questions around that?
Yeah, so I still don't understand why when I'm doing it, when my consult note comes up, it's like single sentences of this patient, exercises twice a week. This patient does dance. This patient, like it's every single sentence is starting with like what can I do with the customization to stop that from happening?
Yeah. So do you have that dot point, dashes, or paragraph selected?
I'm not sure. I'm just checking. I'll just log in and check.
That's all right.
Sorry, you go ahead and I'll check.
So that's a great example. And so
dot points. Sorry, I just logged on. Dot points.
So let's say that there's language being used that you don't want to use effectively. So what you could say is you must never repeat yourself when starting dot points. And then you could also say, don't refer to the patient, like don't repeatedly refer to, the patient as, quote, the patient, and start sentences with the same thing. And so by using that kind of language, you will see that it will know, okay, I'm not going to start sentences like that. And I'm generally not going to refer to the patient as like the patient directly as well. And that will remove that or reduce it at least from the notes.
Okay, great.
And then to also touch on how you can change the language of the notes. So you can make it more concise as well. So another thing you could say in here, for example, is you must always make your notes extremely concise, using the fewest number of words possible, and only include the most essential information in your output effectively. And so what that's doing there is telling it to include less information generally, but also to use more concise, and I would say less grammatically correct language when writing out the notes.
Okay, yeah.
And that will effectively cause it to change its style. The core thing that you want to address with Lyrebird when you're personalizing is basically you want to give it a command for how it writes, so the language and style, and then also the content of what it writes. So that could be changing the content, it could be increasing it or reducing it. But defining those two things really helps get a great personalization.
Okay.
Were there any other questions around the patient notes customization section? Okay, perfect. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to run through an example of a new document and creating a new document and showing you how this works in the document library. So we're going to go ahead and write a letter back to a referring clinician, so a GP or someone who's referred you. And so we're going to call it to referring clinician. Webinar. And so you're going to put in who is the recipient. And what this does is just lets Lyrebird have some more context for the document or letter that you're writing and have effectively a better output. So we'll say, this is going to be a letter. And now you will instruct it whether to include this for review consults, initial consults, both. And again, this just gives it more context on the language to use. Okay, perfect. And so now what we're going to do is upload a few examples. And so what we recommend doing is uploading at least 3 examples. You can do up to 5. And it's important to also note to only include the text in your examples that you want to produce an output. So I know a lot of you use EMRs, for example, Best Practice or Genie, and they include your letterhead. They include a lot of the other things like your signature as well. And you don't want Lyrebird to produce that. So if you have that in the examples you upload, Lyrebird will try to recreate it. And so for that reason, it's best in these example PDFs or Word documents that you can upload to only include the core body of the letter. And so what I'm going to do is go ahead now and I will upload some examples of letters. I'm just going to go ahead and find an example here. And so what Lyrebird will also be doing in this process is scanning through your letters for trends. So it's going to look for similarities in the way that you start sentences, refer to patients and describe things, and also learn from that as well as gesture language. Any questions from anyone?
I was interested, which I'm not sure you'll cover in this session, but more assessment type reports as well. Yeah, I'm not sure if you'll cover that today, but can always go through that at another time. But that's sort of, yeah. my area of interest for using
Yeah,
Lyrebird.
definitely. I'm more than happy to cover that. I don't know, did you have an example assessment that you wanted to recreate in here? Was it a kind of like a personal one, or was it like something like an NDIS, sorry, or like a more like official report?
Probably I'm a child neuropsychologist, so it would be more of an official report with lots of findings. So I wasn't quite sure how much Lyrebird could assist. I know the background information and perhaps summarizing some main points if we sort of record the feedback session or something like that, but I wasn't quite sure yet to what extent a program like Lyrebird could assist.
Yeah, no, for sure. More than happy to answer that. And that's actually a great question as well. And the answer is it's extremely complex in terms of what Lyrebird can do, especially with this new personalization feature. And I'll actually show that to you now. But the core thing to understand with Lyrebird is it can do just about anything as long as it has the context for what you want included. So, for example, if you're creating a letter or an assessment document that includes information that Lyrebird doesn't have in the notes or hasn't been discussed in the consult, then it will struggle to include that in the output. And there's workarounds. So if you, for example, paste that information, you've done a consult and you paste that information just as text in the note section, Lyrebird can then, instantly learn from that and use it as context for the assessment rights.
Great.
And that will help it as well.
They're the bane of our lives, so that sounds amazing.
Yeah, no, definitely. Is there?
Is that where you're posting text into? Say you've done the recording and it's already come up with the consult note, and you're pasting more text in there to generate the letter?
Yeah. I'll go ahead and show you now. So let's we'll go to history, and so let's say you've finished a consult and it looks like this. So what you can do is, say you finish a consult and then, like you said, you want to generate an assessment. And let's just pretend that the medical certificate's a very complex document at this point in time. And let's say you've got obviously that context. So you've got your notes, which has most of it, but there's other things you want to be included in the assessment. Then you can effectively go and take it and then just, if you create a few new lines under here and then just paste it under there. So as long as it's in this context box of the notes, then it can be included.
Okay, great. And
it does help to give it a bit of context in terms of what it's looking at below. So you could say this is an assessment from a allied health professional, so it at least knows what it's dealing with. But other than that, it's pretty good at it. So I'm just going to go ahead now and jump into this example that we've got. So this is what has been output by Lyrebird. So it's scanned through the document that I uploaded and it's extracted a number of things. The first is it's extracted the structure. So what we've got, and this is what I had in my example, was an introduction, a history, physical exam, imaging, management plan, conclusion, and a signature. And so the purpose of this is as well to show you what happens if you include something that does include, a sign off and a header as well. So here we've got, the electronic verification of the signing of the note, third-party release statement. This is what will happen if you don't remove that. It's not the end of the world, but you just don't want it in there. And so it's as easy as just clicking the X button on that section and it will remove it. And so to give you more context as well as what this entire system is each of these blocks is effectively representing one section or heading in the notes or the letter or the document. So not the notes, sorry, just the letter or the document. And what you will do now in this version of the personalization is you're seeing in real time the understanding and learning that Lyrebird has made about your document, and you can edit the individual section. So there's a number of things you can edit here. The first is the writing style. And so that can be in paragraph form, which will represent it in free-flowing sentences, very much like a normal letter, or you can move it to dot points, which will list the points in dot point form under that heading, or numbered points. So it will list it in increasing number, in numbers from 1, 2, 3, 4 with the key points. The other thing is the heading. So you can completely change it. Let's say we want to call this, instead of physical exam, we just want to call it exam. All you have to do is just change that. And now in the letter, when it's written, it will use a different heading.
Do you have to have headings in the letter to use this function, Kai? Because normally I would write a letter without headings.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect question, and leads me on to the next point, which is the fact that you can remove the headings entirely. So here we've got include heading, but we can say exclude heading. And so what we'll do is we'll still do an introduction, but it won't use a heading for it. Does your letter, when you write them, they still have, you know, sections in them, but you just don't use formal headings?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
like exactly perfect. So what you do is effectively just mirror what you use and then just click exclude heading for all of them, and it won't use any headings at all. And so what we'll do is include the headings for this example. And so, so this is effectively the stock structure. You can add a heading as well. So if you click there, it will insert a new block, which represents a new heading section. But it's important to know as well that this comes in completely blank. So it's got no description, which means it has not really any context for how you want it written. And that means that when you add a new heading, you also need to add in a description that, you know, in a similar way to this section here, history describes, gives an instruction to Lyrebird. So describe the patient's past medical history, and it has a few examples. You need to also do a similar description for your new heading, give it a name, and then you can adjust everything. The order is also fully customizable, so you can drag and drop this down to anywhere you want. You can see that under the introduction, but you can move it around as well. And so let's go ahead and start customizing this, and we'll start using it in a couple of real examples. So here we've got this patient here who has a severe bunion and has an inability to drive as well. And so we want to write a letter to the referring clinician, and we're going to go ahead and do that now. So that's the example there, the webinar example, and now it's going to begin writing it out. So it's using the introduction heading, got the date included there as well, and so it's writing it out. And so when you are building your headings and your documents, it's going to require a little bit of tuning, but the benefit now with the version 2 library is that once you get it there, it will work every time extremely well into the future. And so what I'm going to do here is, let's look at this section. Okay, so let's say for introduction, we actually don't want it to be a long introduction. We want it to be literally one line and give some history on the social context of the patient. So what I can do is in a different tab, I'll just go back here to my introduction. And what I can say here is thank you. You know, let's say we want to start this with thank you for your referral of patient name. And so what I'm going to enter here is always start this section with thank you for referral. And so again, giving the direction. So like, I want you to always start it and then the content of that start. And now what we're also going to say is we want it to be a lot shorter. So what we'll say is this section must be no longer than one sentence and be extremely concise. So this section and so let's see if there's any other edits we want to make. Upon exam, let's say we like to start it with the word on exam, not upon, for example. We can go to physical examination and say, always start this section with exam. Perfect. And you can see that it's being auto-saved in real time. And so we've got this here, and let's just regenerate it. So we'll regenerate that letter. And let's look at this. So it's immediately the introduction has gone down literally to one sentence. And that's obviously significantly shorter. But, you know, for example, let's say we want to have a nice little, you know, a brief introduction of his social history. We don't want it to be too short. We can go back in here and say, followed by a brief overview of patient's social. So kind of telling, hey, start with this phrase, include a very brief overview of the social status, but it still can't be more than one sentence. And then now we see that physical exam has been started with on exam. And so that's also changed in real time. And so now let's regenerate it with this new change to the introduction. And so it's gone ahead and used a slightly different introduction there and given, a brief overview of, IT professional with a severe bunion on the right foot. And that's effectively it. So now every time I generate this letter for every consult into the future, it's always going to write out in this exact format. And if I ever want to change it, I can do that really easily. And I can make a document, different types of presenting complaints. I can be very specific with it. And we're also building the feature very shortly. That means that you can share your documents with anyone else in your organization. And so what that means is, let's say you get a really, a cracking letter to a referring clinician for maybe a specific issue or a NDIS assessment. You can then immediately share that document and that template with anyone else in your organization without them having to go through the customization process and build it themselves, which I think will be extremely helpful based on what we've heard. And so around setting up the assessment templates, it effectively works the exact same thing. So you're going to go through the same process. Instead of clicking letter, you're going to click this is an assessment. And then you'll have the output given to you in terms of structure the exact same way. And then it's really just about doing the same tuning and giving it a lot of context for the length of the section, the way you want it written, the examples maybe that you must hit, because I know some of the assessments can have points and specific diagnosis maybe that you have to give in certain sections. So using examples are really helpful for that as well. And then effectively just going into your history, selecting a consult that is a great example for that kind of assessment, and then, generating it, looking at what you don't like, making refinements and generating it again. And as you saw, it will change immediately from any adjustment. So it doesn't take long at all to refine it through this process. But I'm going to go ahead and stop now and ask if there's any questions.
No, I think this particular feature could be a good game changer. Is to personalize things, so it's good.
Yeah, definitely. Did you use it before the V2 library came out?
No.
Yeah, so before it used to be a bit of a black box in terms of Lyrebird would learn from the uploaded documents, but you couldn't go in there and see what it thought and also customize the headings in real time. But obviously you can, which is super, super exciting. And so another thing to cover on this is the impact for dictation when you create these documents. So if I go to dictate, you can see that now when I dictate, I've got all these options here. And so we've got direct dictate. And what that is, as I'm sure some of you know, is sort of a word-for-word transcription, but it will just switch up things ever so slightly if you use ums or ahs, and also any grammatical issues with the dictation will be fixed automatically. So if you use something like Dragon Medical 1, you'd know that quite often there can be weird spelling issues and grammatical situations, and none of that is applied with direct dictate. And so smart dictate is more like dictating to an assistant. So that will not just transcribe what you say word for word. It is actually like talking to a junior medical officer and saying, hey, I want you to write me a document for this patient. And then you can be super, vague and kind of incoherent almost with your words, which is, I've been told, great at the end of a very long shift to use. So let's just do an example here. So I want you to write me a letter to to the referring clinician of Tom, who is a patient that had a severe right bunion on his right foot, and he's not looking very good. He's going to need surgery most definitely, and I'm going to see him in 4 weeks. So go with risk of surgery. Please confirm in the letter that I've described the risk of the procedure and address it to his GP. Make it quite a concise letter and use direct language. So you can describe how you want it written as well. And so we're just And so that's just gone ahead there and written that letter for us without us having to really think about it. We can go back on our word. We can say, oh no, don't do this, change that. It's just like literally having your own assistant. It's incredibly powerful and super handy, especially when you have to smash out a large number of letters or dictations. Were there any questions about the dictation feature as well? Okay, awesome. And you can also dictate into your templates. So you can see it's been cut off here. Letter to referring clinician. the webinar version, you can dictate into that template. So you create the structure, you can dictate, and then Lyrebird will just format your entire dictation into the headings and everything for you as well. And so that's quite straightforward. Were there any questions up to this point about the entire process of customizing your notes or documents so far? Or any new features you could use it for, like around the assessments, how you could use it for assessments as well. Okay, perfect. So now what we'll cover is the macros and also the word replacement feature. So let's go ahead and navigate to customization, and under macros, you can see the macros feature. And so let's take a look here at an example and explain what a macro is. So what a macro is it's a piece of pre-formatted text, which is just a block of text that's the exact same every time you use it. So that could be something like the complications of a total knee replacement. It could be the side effects of Accutane. Depending on your field of practice, I'm sure you'll have them, but they are frustrating when you have to type it out manually. So what you want to do is when you go to create a macro, click create macro, and all you have to do is just give it a name. So you can go complete knee, normal knee exam. And then you can just paste the text in there. So you can go like 1, and we'll do like 2, 3. Normal. Just going to go super brief here so I can go through this quickly and not waste anyone's time. So we've created a new phrase there, which is super exciting, very in-depth knee exam there. And let's go to a patient and go ahead and run through this. So now what you do is, let's say we want to insert it in the examination section. So all I have to do is go here, and if I click /, I'll see normal knee exam, and I can begin typing it out. So normal knee exam here, and it actually shows the text of the macro in there. And I just click enter, and it will paste all that text automatically. So it's super straightforward, and you can do it anywhere as well. You just / normal knee exam, and it will insert that. Did anyone have any questions around those macros there? No?
I'm assuming they're all written macros, not verbal macros.
They are all written. We do have verbal macros, actually. I'm going to find a better example. Total knee, let's go to total knee, should be pretty easy. Total knee steps needed. I'm just going to use an example here. So this is currently in kind of like I guess you could say like an alpha stage. So it's not, like fully built out, but we have built this in. So if I do, let's just go ahead and look at macros. So that was a total knee. So all you have to do is say insert and then just say the macro name, and then it will insert that text. So if I go to okay, letter to referring clinician, I saw the patient Tom today, and he requires a total knee replacement. Insert total knee. Recovery will take 3 weeks. So here you can say that, and he requires a total knee replacement, and then it's said that whole thing of total knee replacement is needed, so just go for 4 weeks time, even though I didn't say that. So it does actually insert the macros if you just say insert macro name. But you just have to be sure that you verbalize and it comes out and is transcribed as that exact macro name word for word. So anything like like a / or for characters you can't verbalize won't be covered and trigger this.
Okay, yeah.
Awesome. And so now let's cover the find and replace, because that's a new feature that's really, really exciting. And so let's say that there's certain words that just aren't being spelled right. So we go to this example, and let's say let's say MTPJ, an acronym. Let's just say it's not being it's transcribed right. So what we can do is hover over that, so highlight it, right click it, and then we can do a replace once or a replace forever. And so replace forever will effectively teach Lyrebird to always replace that phrase that you've highlighted with the phrase you input here. And so what I can say is, let's say IPJ, have that, and that will replace it in this document every time, but it also means that every time that you use that phrase or that appears forward, it will be replaced straight away. And then conversely, if you want to do it only once, you can do the replace once. And so let's go ahead and say, for example, this word here, we want to replace it with, yeah, for example, good. And we'll just get discomfort. And it will just play, replace pain with discomfort everywhere, but it will only do it this one time. And so where you can view all this as well and change them in real time is under word replacement, which is in the customization again. And so you can see all the word replacements here that exist for you. So I've got IPJ is a replacement there. And if I don't want that to be replaced anymore, let's say I accidentally set it there and I don't want, IPJ to replace the, whatever we've set for it to be replaced with, we can just click X. And then now it will never replace that again, and you can delete it. So let's say another example is, a common one is replacing milligrams, the word, with mg. So let's say we just go here and we go, I don't want it to be like that. I just want to always replace it with mg. So you can go replace forever, mg, and then it'll always replace it. Same with, kilograms, meters, and everything like that. So this is a super powerful tool that actually trains Lyrebird on exactly how you like things written, and can let you change the individual phrasing of the document. It's also important to add that any edits you make in this screen will also train Lyrebird as well. And so although this is more of a longer form training method that does take longer, it does over time train Lyrebird on structure and the things that you like in terms of linguistics as well in your documents. So I've said a lot there. Are there any questions based on what I've said so far, or just in general around the product, like anything at all? Questions? Awesome. And so just to add as well, if you ever need to reach out to our support team, we have just the help icon up there, and you can click contact support, and we try to reply in under an hour or two at the most. So you can always just get any assistance you need there. I'd also like to emphasize that you can also invite friends. So you can go invite, and then also share the link with them as well. So if you just effectively go to the profile, it's not working. Let's go back here because I'm screen sharing. So you've obviously got your settings there. You can invite, and then just enter their email there, and that will send an invite to them. And so anyone you invite, because you're a Lyrebird member, will get 10% off their subscription, and then you will also get a free month of Lyrebird for every 3 people you refer that end up signing up. So just let us know when that happens, and we can go ahead and add that to your account as well. But this would be a great opportunity as well to talk about the exciting features we have coming out, because there's a lot coming in early next year. And I think a lot of you will be super stoked to hear it. So the first thing, as I kind of mentioned, was organizations. So what you'll be able to do in coming out sort of mid-January, be organization support. So you'll be able to join an organization that is your practice, and you'll be able to see and manage the other members of that organization if you're the owner. And then we're creating effectively a method of all the ideal documents that are, considered shared throughout that org, which you can elect to be distributed and made available to all members. And so what that looks like is, let's say you're part of a practice, and maybe you are the only one using Lyrebird initially, and then you've got one of the other colleagues that you work with signs up, and you build these great documents and these great templates. You can actually, when a new clinician signs up from your practice to Lyrebird, you'll be able to automatically share all of those documents with them by default. And what that means is that this training process that I've just run through here, once you do it, it can actually lead to a huge efficiency gain for your entire practice. And so it's obviously really powerful when you create these high quality documents and high quality templates that anyone in your group can make in 10, 15 seconds. And from a practice and branding perspective, this is incredibly powerful as well. And in addition to this, we're also going to be having admin support. So people like your admin staff will get dedicated logins. They can also generate all the documents for you on their end and paste it into your email and manage the sort of full generation that way. And I guess before I go into more details, were there any questions around the that that sort of documents and organizations feature, and anything that you'd like to see included as well with other users in your practice that also use Lyrebird. Nothing?
Okay. Might have to think about that one, Kai.
Yeah, no worries. I know there's probably a lot to think about, but kind of like those assessments that you were discussing, they're obviously quite complex documents. They take a lot of time. And so, you know, once you get them there, you can sort of distribute them to everyone in your practice. So it's they don't have to start from the beginning effectively when creating that personalization. And so in addition to that, what will also be coming out is referral and triage support. So that will be more, you know, later down the line in terms of, you know, probably quarter 1, quarter 2. But Lyrebird will actually be able to automatically ingest and interpret referral letters you get if you're a specialist from other clinicians, and give you sort of probability rankings and sort them based on their match for your ideal patient. And so that's super powerful in terms of, I know there's like so many specialists that are just getting a huge number of referral letters, and it's difficult to sort them, correspond with them, and manage that all. So Lyrebird will effectively, if you just input a referral letter, it will automatically scan it, extract all the patient's information on their contact info, and then also give you key matches on you as a specialist on what you would look for in an ideal patient. So let's say that you're a psychologist that only deals with children and adolescents. If you get a hypothetically referral for a 30-year-old, then Lyrebird will scan through that and automatically show that to you. And so this is obviously, I understand, quite difficult to describe and imagine, but it's going to be absolutely amazing and a super powerful feature. In addition to this, there's going to be outpatient forms. So what that means is that you'll be able to actually automatically send out a form to any of your patients and have like predetermined forms, so onboarding forms, questionnaires and screenings, and be able to have them automatically sent off by Lyrebird, and then Lyrebird will actually populate that in your notes for the first time you see them without you having to do anything. And so that's going to be super useful as well. And sort of in addition to this is kind of what you touched on as well, in terms of that assessment for wanting to upload contextual information. You'll be able to upload context and documents for context on the patient level. So let's say we've got Kai here, and at the moment Lyrebird is kind of like seeing Kai in isolation, right? So there's like, there's not really any context going into these notes, feeding that model, especially not for any documents that we generate. But in the future, you'll be able to upload assessments and prior notes onto Kai as a patient. And then for any future document or letter or notes that are generated for that patient ongoing, it will all be used as context. And so you can actually build up this wealth of knowledge and a database around that patient to know them, almost as well as you do. And so obviously, this is something we're super excited to bring to you all. And I think it's going to save even more time. But it's all difficult to imagine, difficult to describe until it's out there. But we're excited to make it happen. Awesome. Okay. So that's the end of the webinar. Thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate your time. And I hope you found it useful. Thank you very much.